pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Welcome to voice print identification. When you see the red light go on, would you please state in the following order your destination, your nationality, and your full name?
Moon, American, Floyd, Haywood R.
Thank you. You are cleared through voice print identification.
Thank you.
Quite frankly, we have had some very reliable intelligence reports that quite a serious epidemic has broken out into Clavis.
I know there have been some conflicting views held by some of you regarding the need for complete security.
Something apparently of an unknown origin.
However, I accept the need for absolute secrecy in this.
This is in fact what has happened.
I'm really not at liberty to discuss this.
We thought it might be the upper part of some buried structure, so we excavated out on all sides, but unfortunately we didn't find anything else.
And hasn't been covered up by natural erosion or other forces. It seems to have been deliberately buried.
4-million-year-old black monolith has remained completely inert, except for a single, very powerful radio emission.
3 weeks ago, the American spacecraft Discovery 1 left on its half-billion-mile voyage to Jupiter.
The sixth member of the Discovery crew was the HAL 9000 computer.
Everything is going extremely well.
One gets the sense that he is capable of emotional responses.
Well, hell, I'm dead if I can find anything wrong with him. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information.
Look, Dave, I can't put my finger on it, but I sense something strange about it.
Just a moment. Just a moment.
Do you know what happened?
I'm sorry, Dave. I don't have enough information.
Made radio contact with him yet?
The radio is still dead.
Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal?
Do you read me, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore.
The pod bay doors are open. I'm your host, Doug Heller, film critic and film historian for TalkMovieToMe.com. Here, transcending the galaxies, with me, as always, my co-host, Jerry Dean Roberts, film critic for ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscars.wordpress.com. How are you, Jerry?
I'm sorry, Doug. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Today we're finally discussing the film from which we got our name. We are looking backwards to the future at 2001: A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick's uber masterpiece in a career filled with masterpieces. This is one of the greats. This is in my top 3. How did
People
you?
have been bombarding me with this question for a year now. When are you guys going to do 2001? When are you going to talk about 2001: Space Odyssey? We themed our show on it.
Yeah.
You would think it would have been our first episode.
But no.
And people keep asking me, and the reason being is because this week that this episode is dropping, 2001: A Space Odyssey turns 50 years old.
Yes.
So this is the 50th anniversary of this tremendous cinematic achievement, and it is an achievement.
Yeah, it is. It is. How did you first come to it?
On New Year's Day in 1981. Wow. This movie dropped on HBO. And I was 9 years old. And, my brain was fully dipped in Star Wars at the time, as most kids my age were. And my dad was watching it. And I sat there and I was watching this movie. And it was just different. He admitted he didn't understand any of it. Never seen anything like it before. Never understood it. Didn't really understand its significance. but just was so bowled over by its oddity, by how strange and unusual it was, how bland the narrative was, in terms of its approach from the characters, but also what a big movie this was.
Yeah.
And it is a huge movie.
Yes, it is.
You can't get a bigger canvas than space. You know,
and human history.
And human history. I thought, and of course, I was 9 years old. I'd never heard of this movie. I thought it was new. I thought it was a new movie. I had no idea that it was, 10 years old, whatever. But I did, and occasionally I would return to it. But I could never say that I understood it. I could never say that I understood any of it until I got to be an adult and I started reading about it and really understanding it. It's just, the rhythms of it are completely bizarre in terms of what you're familiar with. The narrative structure is just, it throws every piece of film language that you know out the window.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And completely builds it from the ground up.
And
when did you see it?
I think that's I saw it when I was, I want to say about 13. I was getting kind of hardcore into movies. I hadn't quite dedicated myself, but my mother said, "Hey, you should watch this." So I rented it and I watched it. And I was bored to tears.
Yeah, that's the prevailing opinion. I always see it. People get bored.
I was sitting there at the beginning going, okay, we get it with the monkeys. And then
okay, they're getting pissed off.
It's like, okay, they learned how to kill. All right, that's great. Let's move it on. Okay, great. I get it. You're docking a space shuttle. Can we move on? And then the part with Hal came, and I was like, okay, well this part's okay. This part's good. And then it got to the Stargate, and I'm like, ugh, come on, I get it. And then the end, and I'm like, oh boy, that was boring. And it put me off of Kubrick. The next Kubrick movie I saw was The Shining, and I was bored to tears with that too, like I said, back on our Shining episode. And
by the way, this is the second Kubrick film we've talked about.
It took me discovering A Clockwork Orange and Doctor Strangelove for me to go back and be like, okay, this was several years later. I'm like, all right, I'm going to try this again. And I put it in the video cassette, and I was floored. I was like, well, I was wrong. I couldn't, I didn't want it to end. And it became one of my top 3 favorite movies. It's my favorite non-Star Wars movie. I'll put it that way.
It is, and I'll put it in very simplistic terms. This is one of the greatest operas ever made. Because the operatic feel of this thing is unbelievable. I was talking about the rhythms, of the way it moves, the way it works. It swells to music. It swells to these grand designs, these grand expressions, using some of the greatest music ever written.
Yeah, yeah.
That whole sequence when you get into space.
The Blue Danube.
He throws the bone.
Yeah.
And comes back down with this nuclear satellite. And you see this ballet, this spectral or this cosmic ballet, these different ships, these different tools that we've built. We've gone now from tools of war into tools of discovery. You see the wheel, you see the ship, you see this moving that back and forth. It's such a beautiful, grand design.
Yeah, it is. It is. And when you break it apart after you've been studying film for a long time, and I watched it again before we recorded this, and I'd always had this in the back of my mind and probably in the front of my mind a few times after watching it, but Robert McKee would say that this screenplay is terrible. It doesn't do the 30-60-30. It doesn't do the 3-act storyline. There's like at least 5 acts in this.
The Save the Cat is not really in this.
Right.
That whole thing is not in this.
No.
It's of course you do have I guess you do have a rooting interest because you don't want those astronauts to die. So I guess that's to Save the Cat. But you getting to that segment, the actual meat of the story, which the meat of the story for this thing is what happens with Hal and how he sabotages this mission. Getting there is the part that really sends people away from this film.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it opens with this. It opens, I guess, in the African desert.
Yeah, the dawn of time.
And the dawn of man, and you see all of these monkeys running around. They don't know what to do. They don't know anything. They're just savage creatures. They're just like every other animal. And
eating
they
berries
are,
and fighting with warhogs.
Right, right. And they're just running around. They don't really know what to do. And all of a sudden, something falls into their midst. It is an object that is perfectly smooth. It has corners. It has all of these different things. They've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
And when I saw it the first time, I thought of a headstone. And I thought, okay, is this death? What is this? Is it? I didn't understand.
It turns out to be quite the opposite.
Well, nowadays when I see it, I think of a tablet, a teaching tool, as it always will be. When you are approaching it, it is the mile marker of the next step of your evolution.
Right.
That's also another point of this film. This movie is very anti-religious.
Yeah.
This movie will. This movie takes the biblical idea of man and just throws it completely out the window.
Yeah, it doesn't have time for creationism or anything. The only thing that it does concede is that there could be an intelligence that is so far advanced from ours that when we would encounter it, we would consider it to be a god. And yeah, that's where that comes in, like that and that, you know, that's not completely unsurprising, and it's not unfathomable.
And when I was watching this as a kid, and the monkey, the apes, the moon watcher, and all that happened, my father would always tell me, he said, I don't really understand this part of it. And we were Southern Baptists, and I was going to church, and I think he did understand it. He just didn't want me to be confused with the biblical message that they were trying to impart to me. And I understand that. You don't want to confuse a child. You're trying to teach them a certain way. You're trying to teach them a certain manner. You don't want to confuse the message.
Right.
So I think he did know what the movie was trying to suggest. He didn't want to have to explain it to me. Later on, when I got older and we were watching it together, he said, there is a belief that man came from ape. There's a belief in evolution. And he said, but we don't believe that. I understand it was completely reasonable in the message that they were trying to teach me. But as I got older, I understood that if you throw creationism into this story, it's going to be a mess.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Because that's not where this movie is going.
No. No.
This movie is about evolution.
Pure and simple. Yeah.
Pure and simple. To the point where the three stages, the past, the present, and the future, so that we progress. This is a very positive film, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
a very dark, cold film, but it's very positive because it exacerbates the idea that evolution is a good thing.
It's probably the least cynical Kubrick movie out of all of them.
Yeah, I can't think of another positive Kubrick film.
Yeah, no. It's as soon as you start to think of one, it's like no. Oh, Eyes Wide Shut. No.
You can find it. You can find positivity in some of his work. You just have to dig for it.
Yeah, but it's not as I'll say blatant, even though Kubrick never did anything that was blatant.
No.
It's more blatantly positive.
Well, I'll also say this, and I've if you've been listening to this show, you'll forgive me because I keep throwing this little chestnut out here. Movies are the product of the times in which they were made. And that is absolutely true of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, yeah.
It comes out in 1968. We're in the middle of the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the middle of the space race. And we are a year away. And so this movie comes out. It is also, this is also during a time when religion was on the wane.
Mm-hmm.
The famous article that appeared in Time magazine, Is God Dead?
Right.
In 1966, that comes around. Religion kind of takes a downturn. And so this movie lands right in the middle of that. But seems to be such an oddity. But it was the times that this movie came out that were such an oddity. And because all these different ideas were coming about, and all these different, revolutions and what have you, and all these different... So it was a perfect movie for its time. If you made this movie in 1973, it wouldn't have had that same impact. It wouldn't have had that same resonance because of the times in which it was made.
Right.
We didn't know also in 1968, the space race after the moon landing was not going to go.
It was going to peter out. Yeah, this is completely logical if the space race continued on at the pace that it was going when the movie was being shot and released. But we went to the moon a few times, and then people were like,
yeah,
whatever. Yeah, this was before the whole rise of the moral majority, and when people were trying to use these scientific advancements that was going on with the space race and the Cold War, looking forward, like this is going to be how everything is going to be. They only went 35 years into the future, but it seemed plausible given that rate of progress. It's the same thing when you watch Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, set in 1939. If all of the stuff had been proceeding on the way that you would have expected it to back before that happened, that world of Sky Captain wouldn't be all that fantastic. You could see that happening if all the stuff from the World's Fairs in the late 1800s actually was allowed to happen.
The promise of tomorrow.
Yeah. But unfortunately, We lost interest in space, number one, and number two, you know, corporate interests and everything decided to put the stranglehold on, you know, new fuels and other technologies that probably would have been ready decades ago that are just starting to kind of see the light today. So, you know,
Yeah, it is a little. It is a touch dated because
yeah,
it does. There's a the idea of space travel because everybody thought, like, everybody at the time thought space travel was right around the corner.
yeah, that they were going to be able to board a shuttle, go to the moon on routine business, and come back like a week later. You know,
And it's Pan Am.
yeah, I love. I love that he's flying commercial.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's one of the funniest parts of that. And you know it is dated and it is a capsule of the times, like you were saying, because you know if you look at the furniture, it's the '60s idea of futuristic. Mostly what we would buy at IKEA now, in terms of furniture.
Yeah, yeah. It's just off of Frank Lloyd Wright.
Right.
It's just off of that kind of design. Yeah. And the stewardess comes in, and she's got this big. She looks like something from Spaceballs.
Mm-hmm.
She's got this giant. She's got this giant hat. It looks like it's from Spaceballs, and she comes in and she's just kind of doing the functionary thing, and it was really interesting. I watched a documentary about this just the other day, and I've always been sort of mesmerized by the smaller visual effects in this.
Mm-hmm.
One was that scene where the guy is sitting in the seat and he's asleep.
The pen.
And his pen starts to float around.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wondered, it's like, how do they do that without strings or anything? It turns out they taped it to a piece of glass.
Yep.
And they were just turning the glass, and she comes along and just plucks it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that is so simple. No
because they were using the brand new invention of double-sided tape.
Right. Right.
I saw that documentary too. Yeah.
And it was just it. I'm always amazed by just the little things in this film. I'm always every time I see it, I notice something different. Like now that I'm older and I watch this film, I realize that when you watch the ape sequence,
mm-hmm.
they're not just a collective of hairy savages. They're, if you really are paying attention, they're individuals.
They're individuals, and it's a clan.
Yeah.
Because there's a rival clan that comes up to try to challenge Moonwatcher, and that's when he takes the life of a fellow ape for the first time.
Right.
Which would have condemned him to death in the Planet of the Apes, because ape shall not kill ape. But that rule hadn't been established.
But there's him. There's a more timid ape. There's one that's more aggressive. There's if you're really paying attention, they do have characteristics. Although they are difficult to tell apart. But they don't look like monkeys at the zoo.
That was always the funny part for me, is like I'm sitting there watching it the first couple of times, and I'm like, they have to be people in suits, but those are damn good suits. Like,
but they look like they've moved away from the typical ape form.
Right.
They've evolved a bit toward the Cro-Magnon man. They've evolved a little bit away from that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting them, I guess, closer to the missing link.
Yeah.
So they're not quite, the chimps in the zoo or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you see them grow because eventually, and again, I talk about an opera. You get that scene where Moonwatcher's sitting there and he's bored and he's just flipping these bones back and forth, and then all of a sudden he hits one and it breaks, and he hits another one and it breaks, and it turns into this just complete rage thing.
Yeah, and when I first saw it, I'm like, okay, yeah, he's learning how to use tools. He's learning how to use a bone for a weapon. But when you rewatch it, when you sit there and really pay attention to it, you can see these were all dancers that were dancers and pantomimes.
Dancers and people with mime training.
Right. To do this, and the guy that played Moonwatcher was a professional mime, and you can start to see the wheels turning in Moonwatcher's head. Like, wait a minute, hit this, and it's not like we would see in a modern movie where in a movie by anybody else where he would hit one thing and then he would hit the skull and then you would see him actually going out and hunting and then hitting the thing and then it would move on. This is, you watch him figure out what to do, and then as he hits the skull, then you see one of the pigs drop, but you're not involved in the hunt, which I'm really happy for.
And the pigs don't look like pigs.
No, they're like a warthog, but they don't have the tusks.
Yeah.
And
just have this long nose.
Yeah, I thought it was funny that they were cohabitating before they started to eat them. They were sitting there eating the bushes and the berries, pushing the pigs away. Like, come on, leave me alone. I want to eat. And
yeah.
And then
you get this. Here's the funny thing. When I was a kid and I saw this for the first time, and that scene where he's hitting the bones, I thought he was trying to make music. I thought he was discovering music, and it was only later that I discovered. Oh no, he's discovering violence.
Yeah.
Because he's going to, and I saw this later on in there's a series called Planet Earth, which is absolutely the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's a series where you see various parts of the Earth, and at one point they deal with monkeys, and these monkeys are living, these gorillas living out in the African wild, and they form a family. And then all of a sudden, over the ridge, you see all of these other gorillas, and you're thinking, I've seen 2001. It's about to get real.
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
They're about to go to war.
Stuff's about to go
down.
Gonna be pretty. Yeah.
Because that is what mankind is. I'm sorry. As much as we like to be passive, as much as we like, man, unfortunately, is a violent beast, and gives in to those violent tendencies. That is a primal characteristic that we as civilized society have tried our best to work ourselves away from.
Right. We haven't quite found the monolith that helps us get past that.
No. But we have discovered tools that help us do things. And we've discovered, a way, as the bone is flung into the air, we have discovered a way to escape our chains from the Earth.
Right.
And we are in space now, and we are moving toward, there's a signal apparently moving toward the moon. I never really understood
the single greatest smash cut in the history of
and
film.
the longest.
And the longest, yeah. It just throws it up, bang. We go millions of years in a heartbeat to that orbiting weapons platform, and then the Pan Am docking with the circular space station that everybody thought that we would
have.
Very slowly, but very realistically. And there's no sounds in space. This was the first film that ever dealt with the vacuum of space like it was a vacuum. Uh, no, no sound, or really there would probably just be very limited sound because, sound does bounce off of objects, and there are a lot of objects in space.
Yeah.
But what is it vibrating? You might be able to hear something if you get close to an asteroid or close to some space dust or something. But if you take your helmet off, you die anyway. So
it doesn't sound like George Lucas made it sound.
No. And the only thing since then that I can think of, and I may be wrong, is when Joss Whedon did the Firefly movie, is the Serenity movie. On Firefly, he didn't use sound in space, and the only time that there's sound in space in Serenity is when there's that upper atmosphere space battle with the Reavers and the Union. But because it's in upper atmosphere, he decided he could get away with sound because there would be air up there to make the sound. That's the only one that I can think of that he...
There's also that. But there's also some movies that deal in science fact, like Gravity.
Right.
Gravity knew that there was no sound in space.
Mm-hmm.
But science fiction, it's really boring to make a movie like Star Wars and not have sound in space.
Yeah, it's an aesthetic choice.
Yeah.
But with this, because the funny part is, like, people will say now, we're recording this in 2018. Obviously, the predictions of 2001 didn't come to pass. We've not been to Jupiter. We've not seen the Star Child as of this point in our history.
Man hasn't been to Jupiter.
Right. So, but the innovations and the things that he thought would be prevalent in some cases are the video phone. We're recording this on Skype.
Right.
Hello. I mean, FaceTime and all that. I mean, it was the only thing that they couldn't really predict, that they couldn't really figure would happen, is the miniaturization of computers.
Right. There's a line in Apollo 13 where Tom Hanks is giving a tour, and he tells the people, "We've now reached the point where a computer can be fit into a single room."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the simple fact that our laptops or our cell phones probably have more capabilities than HAL did.
Or the rocket that went to the moon.
Or the rocket, yeah. It's staggering, and there would be no way for them to have predicted anything like that. It's like watching the old Star Trek, and they're like, the big thing was like the flip communicator, and it's like that's so futuristic. It's like, now that's actually kind of antiquated because it's basically a walkie-talkie.
Well, and the 2001 seemed to project the idea that we would project outward. Physically, we would project outward. We would go out into the galaxy and we would do things. Instead, because of the changes that happened with the space program and all of that, we decided what happened was our evolution came in the area of communication technology. We did it just on a very small scale. The evolution of our communication technology is staggering.
Yeah, the way that it just kind of leapt forward.
And evolves about every year. It changes every year. I mean, my God. It's how often does a new cell phone come out?
Yeah, exactly. And there's sometimes it's like, well, why did you bother do a new one when you could have just included this minor upgrade in the next big overhaul? But and all that's thanks to Hedy Lamarr, who was a genius. came up with
Hey,
satellite. Came up with yeah, that's later. Um,
yeah, we'll get to that later.
uh, so I it's really remarkable, and if you really think of it, like the fuel problem is really where we've always kind of gone wrong, and why they've decided that it would be very difficult to have a manned mission to Mars because of all the fuel that they would have to take with them. So that's something that we didn't spend a whole lot of time on, is updating our fuel uh, parameters, and how we could, not use things that blew up to get us places. We're still working on that, even though it probably should have been done
The idea
40
of
years ago.
sending the idea of sending people out into space, sending people to other celestial bodies, has kind of died off.
Yeah.
We talk about it, but we've not gone past the moon.
There's a renewed interest though with what is it, Elon Musk trying to get stuff out to Mars. It's going to fall to the private sector, because
That's what I was thinking a few years ago. I was like, okay, this is going to can come down to a lot of really stupidly rich people, ridiculously rich people, putting their efforts into this. Because the government's not going to do it.
No, and then that just edges us closer to a Blade Runner alien future than a Star Trek future. But Blade Runner alien was always more plausible anyway.
Our exploration is unmanned. We look out into the galaxy rather than going out ourselves. The Hubble Space Telescope, which I found, the images it brought back were remarkable.
They were.
The Eagle Nebula and all of that.
Yeah.
The Voyager space probe, sent out in the 70s.
Voyager.
Voyager. No, that was Voyager 6. Which I think was sometime in the 70s, mid-70s, that they sent out, and they're still monitoring it. I think it's still, I don't even know where it is.
It's the first human-made object that has left the solar system.
So it did leave the solar system.
It's actually out beyond Pluto. It's the first interstellar thing we've had, and it took 40 years. They weren't sure that it was going to be able to escape the sun's gravity, even that far out, but it did. They got the telemetry from it eventually, and because it takes something like an hour or something for the delay just to go back and forth from that far out. But yeah, it did officially cross out of the solar system, and now it's out in the inky black darkness of nothing.
We flung the bone
right
out into space. We're seeing what comes back down again. The other was, something like the Pathfinder, which I was excited about. Because when the Pathfinder went up in '95, I thought that was the rebirth of the space program. Nope.
No.
But what it brought back was amazing.
Yeah, it was. And, and just even moving beyond this one little bit, the thing on the moon, I think I can explain that part. So what happened was they were doing an excavation on the moon. They were just kind of digging, and they found the top of this thing. So they excavated out around it thinking that it might be bigger, but it's just this, 10-foot tall, perfectly smooth monolith. So they call...
Like second appearance.
Yeah. They call Dr. Haywood Floyd from Earth, played by, I think it's William Sylvester, who fans of Mystery Science Theater 3000 will know from Devil Doll.
Yes.
And there was one other one that he did. I can't remember what the other one was that they did with William Sylvester, but he goes, takes his commercial moon jet by himself, which, I mean, and he goes to investigate it. What they've decided is the cover story is that there's some sort of an outbreak of a plague at this crater base, so that people don't know what's really going on, that they would decide to tell people after they knew a little bit more what was going on. So it took Dr. Floyd getting there, which sounds like a Muppet, but he goes in and he sees the
1999, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So he goes in and he walks up and he touches it, and it emits this burst of high-pitched radio frequency directed toward Jupiter, and then it goes dormant. It was just like saying, "Hey, they found it," and then nothing. So they put together this mission to Jupiter in 18 months, less than 18 months. How they got the Discovery 1 built, let alone built, launched, and
out to Jupiter
in 18 months, that's kind of staggering. But that brighter timeline had the means to do that, and they've already come up with stasis, and this supercomputer, and so they go looking for, trying to find out where this radio signal went to, and that's where Dr. Bowman, Dave, played by Keira D'Elia, and
Poole.
Yeah, Dr. Poole, played by, what is it, Gary Lockwood? I know the actor's name, but I couldn't think of the character's name. And that sets that whole thing in motion until finally Hal thinks that the humans will endanger the mission, so he tries to kill all of them.
Yeah, and the worst thing is, and the original design for Hal was to be a robot on the ship. Just sort of clanking around, this and that. But the idea is much scarier, that your robot is the ship.
Right, and he controls 100% of your life when you're out there.
He controls the airlock.
He controls the airlock. He rotates the pod. He opens the pod door. Not just the pod, the bay, the actual door to the pod. There's no button to push to open that.
There's a scene. There's a part in the book which I read. There's a part in the book.
I read it too. Yeah.
Literally ends with Dave hearing a noise, and it takes him a few seconds to realize that Hal has opened the airlock. He's opened the pod bay doors.
Yeah.
And there's this fierce wind going on. Hal is trying to kill you.
Yes. And, he gets back in after getting Dr. Poole and then having to let him go to float forever out in the inky black darkness. And when that is, but when he blows his own airlock and to get in, there's an expectation that what you see him prepping to be ejected when the air rushes, and then there's a cut to the other side of the door in the hall, and when it blows, you see the mist. There's no sound. It's completely opposite of what you were expecting. And he bounces and he closes the gate, and the air rushes back in. And
got about 10 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, it's just this gorgeous, gorgeous thing. And, he puts on whatever helmet he can find. It doesn't match his suit. Disconnects Hal.
There's this great scene where he's approaching Hal, and there's this focused look in his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, it's that Kubrick gaze under the eyebrow, the primal thing.
Yep.
And Hal is begging for his life.
I'm feeling much better now, Dave. I really am.
Don't. Stop. Dave, I'm afraid.
I can feel my mind going. My mind is going, Dave. I can feel it.
And he gets inside the computer, which it's a weird visual when he gets inside the computer because it's all he likes. And all these little crystal
there's no artificial gravity in there, because there would be no air in there. There's no reason to have life support inside the computer brain, the CPU, or what would be the CPU now. And it's funny when you're sitting there watching it, he floats in, and then he kind of looks up and starts to take stuff down, but then it cuts so that it looks like he's level, like that it looks like he's horizontal with the floor, because from that angle you are. But and then the video comes on, and it's tilted around, and you realize that he's actually kind of upside down. He's on the ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And from that point, he takes the pod out, and the monolith is floating in Jupiter's orbit. The planet aligns with the moons and the Stargate.
But before that happens, he shuts down Hal.
Yes, he does. He's
trying to comfort Hal, and Hal starts singing.
He's like, "Do you want me to? I know a song." Yeah.
It was the first song ever recorded first song ever sung by a computer.
Right. Yeah. Daisy.
And it's Daisy. And once Hal has been sufficiently cut off, this message comes up that Dave realizes that Hal has been completely briefed, notified, but did not tell the crew what the entire intended mission was.
Right. The
they
crew
didn't know about the mission.
Yeah, the crew wasn't to know about what was really going on until they got into Jupiter space.
Right.
They just thought that it was a regular manned exploration mission to Jupiter. And putting the three doctors on already in stasis means that either they knew and they were put under so that they didn't say anything because they figured the computer could keep a secret.
Yeah.
But once they were launched and on the way, they could have been like, "Hey, this is what we're really going to do." You know, it keeps an objectivity on the mission. There's no anticipation. There is, but there's not an extra level to it. So.
And then the Stargate.
Yes, and then oh my God, the Stargate.
It kind of goes on and on and on, but it's this, again, the ballet, the operatic thing, idea that.
The funny thing when I was watching it this last time, like I said, it's my favorite non-Star Wars movie, but it's not a movie that you can sit and watch a lot.
And you do have to sit and watch it.
You do. The Stargate thing happens, and I'm sitting there watching it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, it's over? I mean, it's a good 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But I was surprised how fast it went this time.
He arrives in a place that is, it's longer in your mind than it is on screen.
It is, yeah.
But he arrives in a place that is neither here nor there. And the way I see this movie,
it looks like the world's most uncomfortable hotel room.
We are basically lab rats in a small testing area being overseen by some alien intelligence.
Okay.
And they want this is the way I see it. And we're moving, progressing forward. This room is what they think human beings are comfortable with.
Right, but it's like I said, it looks like the most uncomfortable antiseptic hotel room in the universe. It's like,
and it's become the front image of every episode of this show.
Yes.
Because we are unlocking the mystery of every show, every episode, or every movie that we talk about.
Exactly, because
so the movies are our monolith.
What I always took this as was this higher intelligence swung by Earth and saw potential. So they dropped this first monolith in. The apes touched it, and they're like, okay, they're gonna start. They look like they're starting to move along now. Let's bury one on their satellite, and once that gets triggered, we'll help them move forward again, to kind of help us along into their path of evolution. Not that they're experimenting on us, but that they're benevolent aliens that are like probably doing this on many other worlds throughout the universe, and in a way kind of a godlike figure, but just using their technology to help other worlds along. And then once we get there, in order to take us up, as Emerald would say, kick us up a notch, they try to comfort him, and he sees the different stages of his life, and every time he can see forward, he can see his next step, but when his next step turns around, his past is gone.
Yeah.
Which
he
is
sees himself
beautiful.
in the spacesuit, and there's the old man, and then he turns around and the astronaut.
Well, if you look at the astronaut outside the pod, he's much older.
Mm-hmm.
He has crow's feet. He has a lot of wrinkles. It's like it took him 30 years to get out of the pod and across the room. And then he looks back and the pod's gone.
Arthur C. Clarke wrote this. The book was much different because what happens is, and this is very strange, the way he goes into the Stargate is the top of the monolith opens like a cereal box.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes into it. When he gets to this hotel room, he realizes, there's like it's artificial.
Mm-hmm.
The telephone is empty.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the desk. All kinds of things. And it's just like, it's set.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a living space. It's set.
Well, the reason for that is that Kubrick and Clarke co-wrote the first 3/4 of the screenplay together, and
right. They wrote this book
and outlined the novel. Unfortunately, the time came that for Clarke to depart and work on the book in full, and Kubrick wrote the last quarter of the screenplay himself without consultation to Clarke. He thought that they had something already ironed out, which is what went into the novel, and Kubrick changed it completely.
Yeah.
Which is why the last parts of the book don't match with the last parts of the movie, because Kubrick came up with something that was even higher minded than what they'd come up with for the novel. So that's why there's a divergence.
I like the ending of the movie better because
Me too.
It's left a little more ambiguous. He's ancient at the end of this. The monolith, as we said, is standing at the end of the bed, and just like the apes at the beginning, he reaches for it,
and then he turns
and
into
when
the
he
Star
reaches
Child.
For it, there's a rebirth because
Right.
in the bed you see that child.
Yeah, and then he goes back to Earth. Now,
right.
Here's what I have a question on. Now, we tossed around talking about 2010, the Peter Hames sequel. Arthur C. Clarke wrote a bunch of sequels to the original novel. He got all the way up to 3001, the Final Odyssey, before he died.
Which Tom Hanks had been trying to make into a movie for years, and I think just kind of dropped the project.
Good, because it doesn't need to be. Now, sorry, Tom. So, you know, the sequel has, you know, all of the different factions. It's still presuming a Cold War, and they find the Discovery out.
The sequel's even more dated than the 2001.
I know. It's because, you know, in 2010, obviously, the Soviet Union had collapsed 20 years before, but there was no way to know that in, 1983. You know.
Yeah.
So, they find the Discovery, and they kind of literalize everything. So my question to you is, how long do you think this whole evolution of David Bowman takes place? Obviously, the Star Child didn't show up before the Discovery 2 left to go look for the Discovery. So is this eons in our future?
It's eons in our future. But remember that he's in a space where time and space have no meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So human years are, to him, basically irrelevant. Because he ages in the space of about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. But on the outside, or on the other side of the Stargate, however...
It could be instantaneous, it could be billions of years.
Right. So I always found that very interesting, that they followed it up on and there was never a mention of the Star Child. There was never a mention, nothing about it. It's just this literal kind of rescue mission.
2010. Well, let me put it this way. It's a wonderful science fiction adventure.
It is, but it's a terrible sequel.
If you remove it from 2001. Yeah. Because if there was ever a movie made that didn't need a sequel.
Oh, yeah.
There's a way you could do it, but Kubrick would have had to do it.
Yeah, there's no...
The movie does try to literalize it. It does try to... The message that the monolith sends is a literal message.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go to Europa.
Right.
It's a message of peace that, in terms of what was given to you in 2001, does not work.
Right. No, not at all.
It's but I can watch 2010 and enjoy it. By the way, there's a lot of future stars in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are.
You can watch that movie and enjoy it. It's dated
mm-hmm.
because of all the Cold War stuff, and I love Roy Scheider anyway.
Sure, yeah.
But it's just, as a sequel to 2001, it doesn't work.
It just falls flat.
It does fall flat.
It's unfortunate that they... I don't know. I get why they tried to do it.
It was a noble effort.
Yeah, and it was such an important movie that obviously somebody wanted to take it up and kind of keep the story going, but...
Kick it up a notch.
Bam. But Bam. Yeah, there was no reason for it, and it's not a good sequel, but it is a good standalone. But
it's a good movie.
Yeah.
But a loud sequel.
Yeah. I think we're gonna have to leave it here on 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think that this might end up being the first one that we actually revisit. That we come back and do a part 2 on the actual film.
I'd be okay with that.
There's so much left to discuss, but we do have to be shoveling off, as the digger would say.
50 years. No one's ever made a movie that's even close to this.
No, this is...
They've been attempts. There was the 1972 film Solaris, the Russian film, which is really good. Moving into recommendations,
mm-hmm.
that's really
mm-hmm.
good.
Yeah, it is.
Another film in the tone of this that I think is really great is a movie we discussed early on in this podcast called Under the Skin.
Yeah.
Which has this same tone, the same cold around the heart tone, but also deals in humanity.
Right.
Discovering and trying to figure out humanity and that kind of thing. That's a really good. Just don't watch these 3 movies on the same evening.
Oh, talk about a wrist slasher. That is just, I mean, especially if you go from this to then Solaris and then Under the Skin. My recommendations are in similar veins. There were 2 movies that I have seen, and they're recent pictures. That the only movie that I could think of to compare them to is each other, and that would be Terrence Malick's Tree of Life.
Oh, absolutely!
It's very 2001, and I love it when it goes back. We're gonna have an episode on that. And Christopher Nolan's Interstellar.
Yeah.
That toys with
I
the
need
notion.
to see again because the first time I saw it, it left me cold.
See, I adored it. It toys with the notion of time and how space can alter our perception of time, and on that level, it is very comparable.
Les has got McConaughey, brother.
It does. Right at the end of his of his reconnaissance.
I think it was right around either before or after he won his Oscar.
It was after.
It was after.
I think that was the last movie of the reconnaissance that people were like, yeah, okay, he is really good, and then he went back to doing general stuff, and okay. Well, at least you had a little burst of a positive career, so.
Yeah.
And yeah, those 2. I would say are probably closest in the vein of 2001. Obviously not approaching it. Tree of Life is brilliant on its own. But
we're just challenging.
Yes. So I think that wraps us up. What are we doing next week, Jerry?
Hey boys, look what I got here.
Where are the white women at?
This is Doug's choice. One of your wife's favorite comedies.
My wife's favorite movie.
It is, of course, Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles.
Right.
And we couldn't have picked a movie more different.
I don't think he could have picked a movie more different than anything else ever. This is.
Let me tell you something. I think this and Annie Hall are my favorite comedies. It's a flawless I absolutely love Blazing Saddles. We're going to talk about that.
It's remarkable, and I'm doing that for my wife's birthday, which is April 3rd, but we're doing it the week after because that's when my pick fell. So we're doing that, and yeah, that's what we're going to be getting into next time. I'm very much looking forward to that.
I am too.
So on behalf of myself, Doug Heller of TalkMovieToMe.com, film critic and film historian there, and Jerry Dean Roberts, film critic for ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscars.wordpress.com. I thank you for tuning in. You can find all of our back episodes at www.thepodbaydoorspodcast.wordpress.com. You can find the podcast on Twitter at pod_. What is it? What is it?
Pod_bay. Pod_bay.
Okay. Yes.
That's our Twitter again.
It's new, so we're still learning what that one is. Pod_bay on Twitter. Give us your likes, give us your comments, reply back when we post the episodes. We look forward to seeing you next time. And the pod bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.